Have you ever wished the truth about God made sense? I did. From the very beginning of my religious journey, I expected whatever I read to make sense. In my mind, the truth on any subject should never require suspension of disbelief. Fantasy does. The ancient religious books didn't address my concern. They seemed to be written for people who were more prone to superstition, impressed by the mundane, and quick to see miracles in the ordinary. The urge to worship was common, and the tendency to personify the inanimate was prevalent. The focus was more about who or what to worship as opposed to whether or not to worship at all. Recognizing the creator of all as the only reality worthy of the title God is more sensible and desirable than idolizing the created or imaginary. It felt so obvious to me that everything we could witness or experience has an origin that I didn't see any reason to bother questioning. Unfortunately, the lack of clear understanding of why there must be a creator or what the creator must be like makes space for doubt to fester into denial. We don't know it all, but we know enough to not rely on the supernatural for answers about the natural world. Even while trying to figure out which religion I should follow, if any at all, there was a nagging desire for something that made faith unnecessary and denial unreasonable. Am I alone? If you weren't indoctrinated into a belief system at a young age, I would expect such a feeling to be normal. If you've ever felt that way and know what I'm talking about, what did you do to overcome it? I became obsessed. I refused to give up and give in to faith, denial, or indecision. I must have driven myself crazy in the pursuit of truth because I think I actually found it. What I discovered is so different from what people typically expect when we think about God that it explains why the true understanding has eluded us for so long. To those of you who wish there was a way to understand God that didn't insult your intelligence, your wishes have been granted. If you've ever prayed for a concept of the Creator that was consistent with itself and everything else we have reason to believe, your prayers have been answered. You must be willing and able to break out of the comfort zones of personification and imagination to receive it. Hello, world. I'm Hassan B. Fly, self-taught, non-prophetic messenger of God. I'm the founder of the philosophy Intellectual Righteousness and the author of the book Theology for the New Millennium. I use common sense and math to prove God is real but different from what we typically expect. People tend to focus on what sets the various ideas about God apart, or nuances in interpretation when introducing new theological concepts. Instead of doing that, let's focus on what all the monotheistic doctrines believe about God. The one thing they all have in common is the belief that God is the creator of all. The simplest and most logical way to isolate the creator for understanding is to take away the all that was created. If you were to mentally negate everything, what would you be left with? Of course, the answer is nothing. But that word has so many negative connotations for it to be used in reference to God. It sounds insulting, even blasphemous. In order to avoid any distracting interpretations that could distort the results of our simple logical exercise, let's switch to math. Instead of thinking about nothing and getting either confused or upset, let's consider zero. The difference may not be obvious because people say zero is nothing. But unlike words that are defined by agreement, the definition of numbers is not subject for interpretation. Zero represents none and gives all other numbers fixed and inarguable value. Measurement must have a first, but in order for there to be a first, there must have previously been none. This can be clearly illustrated by the number line. Its foundational role in math mirrors the origin all that numbers can be applied to. Zero's existence isn't proof of a creator, but its necessity within our most objective way of describing reality is. Zero being used as the foundational reference point for defining all value shows us existence itself doesn't need a beginning. Measurement does. It proves everything measurable has an origin that has no measurable attributes. Zero's role in math gives us a way to describe a reality whose attributes we can't count. It also gives us a logical reason why we can't perceive or imagine the creator. I'm not saying zero is God or making a metaphorical comparison between the two concepts. Zero is a human construct. It isn't real, but it does everything within the system of math that we claim the creator does within reality, except for throw temper tantrums and meddle. In math, zero is absolute, immeasurable, without beginning or end, without opposite or equal, flawless, and invaluable. The only attributes associated with God that zero doesn't represent are those that include imaginable or human-like traits. They contradict the concept of a creator, so they should have never been a part of describing God in the first place. We tend to try to imagine what we can't perceive because our first tool of learning is sensory perception, and imagination is its simulation. We tend to personify what we deem supreme because we include choice or the ability to punish or reward with power. While those tendencies are natural, they do distort what is real or what should be believed concerning God. Comparing God's role in reality to zero's role in math clears away all confusion and contradiction. But just like zero was ignored and overlooked while it was implicitly used, it is possible to ignore God and still have access to what God created. Even with sound reason and agreement with the foundation of math, there is no evidence that can force acceptance. After centuries of fantastic tales and fascinating imagery, the truth may seem boring and anticlimactic. The reasons behind your urge to reject and resist are the same reasons why God has remained a mystery for so long. Fiction is more interesting and entertaining than facts, and imagination is more captivating than logic. But if you can overcome the natural tendencies and biases that make this revelation jarring or unsettling, you will see such a simple truth has been made unnecessarily complicated. Because the proof that God is real also shows God is not actively intervening on our behalf, it is easy to make the mistake of thinking God is irrelevant. Simply conceding that I'm not wrong isn't enough. The truth can only benefit you through accepting it. The reason for comparing zero's role in math to God's role in reality isn't just for logical proof of an immeasurable origin of the measurable. It also gives us an opportunity to describe a reality that has no finite traits in a way that is relevant to our lives. Instead of resisting the truth and needing confirmation at every turn, embrace it and explore what we already know about zero to learn more about God. Within that same algebra lesson in which we learn about zero's role in defining the value of all numbers, we learn that positive and negative aren't states of reality. They're perspectives. Everything has an opposite. The positive is what is deemed desirable. The negative is the opposite of what you want. Reality is what it is, which would be positive by default. Negativity, at its core, is a choice. Of course, there are certain instances in which a negative perspective is so obvious and automatic that it doesn't feel like a choice. But those times we find pain desirable or enjoyable show how our perspective of a situation is determined by what we want. Pain itself isn't objectively negative. It can have a positive effect as a warning, motivation to change, or result of progress. In the face of unchangeable and undesirable situation, holding on to that perspective becomes harmful. Any unwanted pain that isn't material, which is unavoidable except through some type of medical or psychological numbing effect, is self-inflicted. It would be dishonest not to admit there are certain instances that make applying absolute value to life in order to gain a positive perspective extremely difficult. In all honesty, absolute value can apply to everything except physical torture. Even death and the threat of hell can be viewed positively when seen through an objective and absolute lens. Without anyone returning from an afterlife to confirm the reality, it is easy to assume heaven and hell are figments of the imagination born from wishful thinking or the fear of death. There are certain undeniable truths that make belief in heaven and hell not just the most logical conclusion, but the only reasonable one that can be drawn. Zero has no opposite equal, so the creator must also be the destroyer. For anything to cease to exist, it must literally return to God. Matter is inert, so the motivation for all action and the root of all awareness must be immaterial. The end of individual existence must occur in an event that takes place after our physical death. The lack of all positive things to be desired or loved, or the negative things to be feared and hated, is the most extreme reality we can ever experience. Promises of extreme abundance without consequence from overindulgence, and the threats of extreme pain without death are meant to give imaginative context that evokes an emotional reaction to the reality of returning to God. In order to be useful, the information must reach beyond academic thought. Taking them literally defeats the purpose and derails the impact of an undeniable fact that can feel abstract. It is the ability to see heaven within hell that unlocks the power of positive perspective in all situations. Death is the most assured and dreaded event that will take place for anyone living. Instead of seeing it as a negative that leads to the absence of everything you could possibly want or love, viewing it as the only way to be free from all that you could possibly find undesirable helps calibrate your lens in a way that allows you to benefit from whatever happens in life. Minimizing the negative impact of the undesirable while maximizing the positive effect of what is desired seems to be the point of every life philosophy. This is the only life philosophy that can deliver the ability to benefit from both sides of duality without delusions. It offers emotional safety through complete honesty. It doesn't totally eliminate the possibility of bad things happening, but it does give you the power to reverse it the most effectively. Prioritizing objects of affection causes worship. The only options for deity are the creator, the created, or the imaginary. Of the three, only worshiping the creator enhances your life in all facets while accepting reality as is. Loving what can be gained or lost most gives your emotional state over to external elements, and loving the imaginary most requires a constant state of delusion for happiness. There is no way to enjoy reality you can't even accept. Monotheism was always meant to make sense, but trying to interpret the ideas presented to people who might have misunderstood the original message made modern man miss it. Without understanding Zero's foundational role in man, it is extremely unlikely any introduction of a creator with superlative attributes that deserve the highest esteem will conjure up thoughts of comparing Zero's role in man to God's role in reality. Even with this understanding, people still struggle to accept it. How will you respond to this irrefutable truth? Will you pretend not to get the message or try to argue against it through evasion and uncertainty about reality? Or are you willing to explore how understanding and accepting the truth about God can positively impact your life? I know this introduction is dense, so it may take some time and contemplation before accepting. This is your invitation to explore what we already know in order to discover what is worthy of belief. Defy the expectations of being able to imagine or personify God, and the truth becomes clear. Embrace what makes sense, even though you cannot perceive or imagine a concept. I believe that is the essence of faith, but it has been twisted into believing things that don't make sense in order to imagine the unimaginable. If we are being completely honest, we would be able to admit logic and math aren't just useful when sensory perception isn't enough. They are more reliable than perception, period, because our senses can be fooled. Logic is the standard of proof, and math is its supporting evidence. Intellectual righteousness is the thinking man's religion. It's based on two facts and one opinion. Those two facts are God is reality with zero to math. And with God is heaven or hell. The one opinion is you should remember those two facts.